হে নিবাসা ঘুঘুতি রুঞ্জু, হে নিবাসা ঘুঘুতি রুঞ্জু মেরি এজু।
Welcome back to the fifth session of the Mussoorie Mountain Festival 2020. I'm Biha Bhardwaj.
And I'm Jamie Alter.
This is the final day of the program and we are here at Jabarkhet Nature Reserve, which is a 15-minute walk from Hannafal Centre.
This is a wonderful conservation initiative. 100 acres of forest is protected and preserved as a refuge for Himalayan wildlife.
Visitors can enjoy the unspoiled presence of nature as they walk along these forest trails, listening to bird calls and absorbing the peaceful atmosphere of the mountains.
Today we're fortunate to have with us another Mussoorie writer, Mr. Bill Aitken, who's explored the Himalaya over many years and takes his inspiration from these mountain landscapes.
As a Mussoorie travel writer, I'd like to invite and welcome everyone to the Mussoorie Literary Festival online. And I wanted to say just one thing, the importance of writers. In 2003, the great American travel writer Bill Bryson wrote an amazing book called A Short History of Nearly Everything. This book, from being a mere journalist, made him Chancellor of Durham University and an honorary fellow of the Royal Society. Can you imagine? An ordinary journalist. Extraordinary. And what did he write in 2003? Beware of a virus that can create a pandemic because the world, thanks to jumbo jets, in one day you can spread it all over the world. Everybody ignored this guy. I mean, he's giving you, I mean, the thousands of lives lost, the millions of dollars gone a-begging, and nobody read him. So please, treat writers seriously, and as I say, welcome to our festival.
Now we will return to our program with an exciting lineup of presentations.
Next, we have a performance by Muhammad Muneem Nazir, a singer-songwriter and co-founder of Alif, a contemporary music band from Kashmir.
Hello everybody, Adab Barze, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Muhammad Muneem Nazir. I'm a poet, singer, songwriter, and I am thrilled and fortunate enough to share a piece of my work as in collaboration with my fellow artists at Mussoorie Mountain Festival 2020. It's amazing that people are doing this kind of work, and I would briefly introduce the artists that are in the collaboration with me. That's Ali Saifuddin and Mr. Noor Mohammad, and what we are singing is a work written by Haba Khatun, and the middle chunk, the one I'm singing, is a piece written by me. And it's the opening, the Ali Saifuddin, he's singing folklore written by Haba Khatun. Then I sing a piece of my composition, and then Mr. Noor Mohammad comes singing one of the famous folklores of Kashmir, that is Roshe, written by Haba Khatun, and then we all join him in singing that piece. I hope you all have a great time listening to this and explore much more of what is beyond that is seen. I wish you all the best. Zindabad.
Gahacho Pyavan Gate Agilate Lapcharp matsarmyo लकचारक मत्सर म्योन हगर्त चार म्योन वक्ताच वापस मत कस जाए
Walaivis wasvayavas Dunya nindritai khabas Usuwaini deditai babas Walomyan Oshe madno sulhama Roshe Roshe Maromyan Oshe madno sulhama.
Next, we have Mamang, an award-winning poet and novelist from Arunachal Pradesh.
Hello, I'm joining you from Arunachal Pradesh. My name is Mamang. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Renu, for having me on this program, the Mussoorie Mountain Festival. It's been a strange, restless time, even though we've been hanging on to our writing, but with mixed images. Most of the time I've been thinking about bats and pangolins, palm civets, even surveillance and big tech, hazardous material, germ theory. But the other day in an online program, the Kritya for Poetry Festival, I heard a Chinese poet. His name is Jidi Majia, and he was reading an ode to humankind, and a few of the lines went like this. It is the time when Italian tears should blur Chinese eyes. It is the time when moans in London should make guitars in Spain whimper. So these voices coming across borders do give one hope. I'll read two poems. One was written for my father. It's called Palindrome. My father spared us the hospital visits. He didn't say much, as if it would confuse us if he said he was not hungry or that he was too tired to walk to the gate. Sometimes I heard him singing in his room. I am comfortable here, he said, all wrapped up, heater on. When you grow old, everything catches up as if on cue. Hair, sight, sound, limbs. Even the night lamp flickers, retreating into a shrinking space, living like a guest in your own house. If you had stayed a little longer, sunlight was spreading across the garden. We could have thrown off our caps and jackets and basked in the sun like iguanas, or simply stayed still like resident geckos entranced in the moment, looking at the green mountain. When old people die, everyone says it was a matter of time. It is the way good men should go, peacefully in their own home, asleep in their beds. What do you say, February moon? What do you say? Never in 1,000 years will we see another palindromic day. Never will we feel the shipwreck of survivors in a strange place, the bed, the chair, the door to the bathroom, tap dripping. Now we'll never know what old men wait for, waiting quietly and for so long, since we were small and they were young, perhaps waiting for this moment, praying to find us ready when we turn and the green mountain is gone. Every morning when the forest wakes, the canopy goes for a walk, hailing the sun, courting the wind, discussing fruit and weather. The idle moss turns to velvet, branches make signs. Who says there is no time? the only thing we are given is time. Chattering life high above babble of tree dwellers, for a seed falling so far down to rise again. Time is a given, a foothold for the hunger of a weed, color, scent, camouflage, and the grass that never sleeps, shooting up to meet the gaze of the mountain. How are you, mountain? Is everything all right? Is the earth growing old? Birds flying away, trees falling, green mountain wearing a rain hat. Are there caves and bats in your bosom? Wedged in your folds, a hum of voices, celebrating the anniversaries of birth and time. Is a raindrop growing into a river, a rock into a jewel? Thank you.
The next presentation is by Max Marble from Woodstock's class of 1967.
Our next presentation is an interview between Harish Kapadia and Stephen Venables. We're very fortunate to be teaming up with the Himalayan Club's Oral History Archives to bring this presentation to you.
Well, I was lucky that I met Stephen Venables before he became famous. What I'd done is great climbs. When he visited Mumbai sometimes in early 80s, we met up and went on trekking around the Western Ghats, which he thoroughly enjoyed. And in 1985 was our first expedition together to Remo Peak in the Siachen Glacier, where unfortunately he had to give up the summit just by a few feet as his rucksack rolled down on the wrong side of the mountain. And his coming down and survival was an absolutely legendary stuff. 1988, he was on the Kangshung face of Everest with the Americans. And it was a absolutely very difficult and challenging climb. And he reached the summit alone late in the evening and had to spend the night out in the open. How he survived, how he came down and suffered even amputations is absolutely credible. And that his book, Kangshung Face, covers it very well. But even with amputations and this fall, he was not deterred, and he joined us, that is Indian team, in 1992 to Panchachuli. He was on Panchachuli 5, where again he had a fall, very technical mistake by others. And he was literally survived and saved because of a very professional climbing friends we had. And ultimately his rescue by helicopter after 4 days on the mountain is also well recorded. Apart from this, Venables is a great writer, author, and has been to Karakorams where he did a lot of explorations. And later on, he came to India to done some lovely trekking together with us. And his knowledge of flowers and fauna and other parts of Himalaya is also excellently good. So here is Stephen Venables, a great speaker. Thank you.
The Kangshung face climb was really all thanks to Ed Webster. It was his idea. Basically, he looked at some photos and thought there was a possibility of a new route up the left-hand side of the Kangshung face, which no one had ever considered before. So it really should be called the Webster route, and that was the plan, the vague plan that we set out. When we eventually got to base camp after a 23-day approach from Carter, we began to look at it more closely, and there was this wonderful growing excitement as we realised this sort of vague idea of Webster's could become a reality. And that was very, very exciting. I mean, mountaineering at its best is quite creative, and you're drawing a line up a mountain, creating something. I'll always remember the very first day, April the 3rd, 1988, when I actually set foot on Everest for the first time. And that morning I was climbing with Robert, the expedition leader, and we made quite quick progress. It had taken us so long to get to base camp, we really were acclimatized. And we fixed several rope lengths, and then we came to this steep wall of quartzite and granite and shale and quartz, and these wonderful bands of rock. And Robert, who's very laid back, said, "Oh, I haven't been doing much climbing recently, you better lead this." So there I led the first hard pitch, and it was just blissful. And that really set the tone for the expedition. And we took turns to lead. Webster, Tia, Anderson and myself. So everyone had a turn leading. It was just a wonderful journey through some extraordinary landscape. Eventually we pushed through to about 7,500 meters, established a second camp. That was on May Day, and then we had about a week of bad weather. And eventually, in the second week of May, we set off on our summit push. And it's the hardest thing I've ever done. Day to Camp 1, rest at Camp 1, then a long, long day to Camp 2, breaking trail, heavy snow, deep snow, back-breaking work. Day 3, for Webster and Tier and me, was higher than any of us had been before. 11 hours, new terrain, finally emerging onto the South Col late that afternoon. Got to the South Col, bitter, cold winds. It's the most god-awful place. Got the tents up, got through the night as best we could, but during the night, Paul Tier felt pretty ropey. By the morning it was obvious that he had warning signs of potential edema. So the only sensible thing for Paul to do was to go down. Being wise and brave, he said, "I'm going to do that." He set off down. Anderson and Webster and I stayed up on the South Col. Very windy day, but during the afternoon the wind abated, and by that evening we said, "Okay, we'll give it a go." So that night we set off for the summit. I got to the South Summit at about 1:30 in the afternoon, 1 o'clock maybe. And so it seemed justifiable to continue. So I continued, and having almost ground to a halt below the South Summit, after the South Summit, with the excitement of the final ridge and the Hillary Step, that gave me a bit of a boost. And I climbed the Hillary Step, and eventually got to the summit at 20 to 4 in the afternoon. And at 10 to 4 in the afternoon I turned around and headed back down again. And my big fear, the nightmares back in London, had always been about getting to the summit of Everest and then finding I didn't have enough strength to get down. And there was a very sobering statistic, because at that stage in 1988, 20 people had reached the summit without oxygen during the previous 10 years. 20 people, and 4 of them had not returned. So that was a pretty sobering statistic. So I was very anxious. I was scared, I hope to God that I'd got some reserve to get back down again. And there were a couple of moments on the way back from the summit when I thought, oh God, you've blown it. Because I was just very weak, very tired, overextended. Descending the Hillary Step was exhausting. There was an awful moment when it was snowing and it was blowing, and my prescription sunglasses got completely iced over, so I couldn't see. So I pulled them off and they're hanging down, and then I was thought, well, I better get out my ordinary glasses so I could see something. So I had to take off my mittens, and then I was fumbling with my zips trying to get out my glasses, and as I was fumbling I could feel my fingers going numb. I thought, no, well, you know, better to be blind than have no fingers. So I just put my mittens back on. It's a real struggle getting them back on. And I thought, I'll just have to manage without glasses. So then I was just going along and finding my way, because I'm very short-sighted. But I just had to manage. Anyway, I got back over the South Summit and carried on down, but I was far slower than I'd intended. Webster and Anderson had obviously turned back. There was no sign of them. So eventually, at about 8,600 meters, as it got dark, I thought, well, I won't. It's too silly to risk making a mistake in the dark. I'll stop and bivouac here. So I did it at about 8,600 meters. And at that stage, before that, only Jim Whitwire had done something similar on K2, alone at that altitude. This was a bit higher than Whitwire had been on K2. So it was a world record for a solo bivouac. But someone's got to do it. And I was lucky because the wind died down. It was a windless night. And that meant I didn't have to dig a snow cave, which is just as well, because I don't think I had the strength to dig a snow cave. So I just scraped out a ledge in the snow and lay down and waited.
So you were completely sitting in the open? No
Completely in the
covering
open.
you, no jackets or...
No, I was just in the clothing I was wearing. But I selected my clothing very carefully. At the back of my mind, I think was always the thought, well, just supposing you got caught out, would you be able to survive? Only based it on experience. Now, a few months earlier on Shishapangara, I'd had to bivouac without a sleeping bag and I'd survived. So I thought, well, this is 1,000 meters higher, but there you go. And I knew that Doug Scott and Dougal Haston had bivouacked even higher in October, well, end of September. And Doug Scott hadn't even had a duvet jacket. Well, Doug is better, he has more natural insulation than me. He's a big lad, but I thought, well, if he can do it without a duvet jacket, I ought to be able to do it with all the gear I've got. So I was pretty confident of surviving. It was just, I knew it was just going to be a long, shivering wait till the dawn. But eventually it came to an end. The great thing about Everest in those days is that, I mean, we had no satellite communication. We didn't even have radios on the mountain. We had no communication with the outside world. And I got to the summit on May the 12th, and no one in the world knew about it. In fact, no one in the world knew about it until June the 2nd. So there was this lovely sense of isolation, and instead of everything having to be instant, and it meant you could present the story in your own way, send out an accurate, detailed press release.
Up next, we have Dr. Sejal Worah, Program Director at the WWF India and co-founder of the Jabarkhet Nature Reserve in Mussoorie.
Hi everyone, welcome to Jabarkhet Nature Reserve, and I'm so delighted to be part of the Mussoorie Mountain Festival 2020 and thrilled that despite all the challenges outside, the festival is back stronger than ever before. The story of Jabarkhet began about 7 years ago, and at that time we really didn't have a clear plan of what this is going to turn out to be. We just had a vision, and the vision was that we wanted to protect, rewild and restore this 100-acre patch of forest and mountainside near Mussoorie. We started this journey with a lot of passion, but not a lot of money and not a lot of resources. However, over the last 5 years since we've opened, we've had a remarkable recovery of both wildlife, of nature, and of the forest. And this is all due to the passion and the excitement of the people who have been part of it. I have been supported in this journey by many, many people, but mostly the local community with whom we have created this vision and this piece of nature that we've restored. Our vision was really to just create local livelihoods and create a sort of value for conservation, so that people living in the area actually saw this not just as a hill to be exploited or a forest to be exploited, but something to be conserved. And I believe that we have been successful in that journey. We have created local jobs, we have created local livelihoods. Our model is very simple and very basic. We've trained local youth to become nature guides, and they take visitors on walks through the forest. Surprisingly enough, even to our own surprise, this has actually been a model that works, and we even broke even last year. However, as you all know, over the last few months, COVID has thrown a spanner in the works of many small initiatives like ours. We had no visitors for 6 months. We did actually have, unfortunately, the kinds of visitors we did not want, which is poachers and wood collectors and fire wood collectors. And we're very happy now that after 6 months of the shutdown from COVID, we started getting visitors again, and we look forward to reviving the Jabarkhet model. My team and I welcome you to come and visit Jabarkhet, to experience what a rewilded forest feels like, and also to become supporter members and help us in the conservation of this little piece of wilderness in the Himalayas. Thank you.
As darkness falls on Jabarkhet Nature Reserve, many nocturnal animals begin to move about. Though human beings are not present, camera traps have been positioned to record images of wildlife in the secret shadows of the night. Triggered by motion sensors, the cameras capture photographs and videos the animals have taken of themselves. More than 20 different species of mammals are found in the reserve. And as a new day breaks, nature's perpetual cycle of life carries on. Located near Mussoorie, Jabarkhet Nature Reserve occupies 100 acres of private land surrounded by government forests. The goal is to protect and restore the forest and its wildlife, while also creating local livelihoods and promoting conservation awareness. Since 2015, when the reserve was opened, much of the forest cover has increased, while many species of birds and animals have returned and multiplied. Three water holes in the reserve attract wildlife, and the recovering habitat nurtures many species. Predators are active mostly at night, but also sometimes during the day, though they are wary of human beings and keep out of sight. More than 150 bird species can be seen in the reserve, both year-round residents and seasonal migrants. Visitors are welcome, and trained naturalists from neighboring communities serve as guides to explain and interpret the many life stories that this forest sustains.
Our next performance is by Sanjay Panday, a musician and a lecturer specializing in folk songs of Uttarakhand. He is introduced by Dr. D.R. Purohit.
Chandrakumar Bartwal was a poet of Chayavadi era, which was the Indian version of Romanticism in India. So Romanticism and Chayavad had the same kind of images, metaphors, and the language. And he was born on 20th of August 1919. He was graduated from Allahabad University, where he learned things under the tutelage of Suryakant Tripathi, Nirala, and Mahavir Prasad Dwivedi. He was a born poet. He had started writing poetry since the age of 15 or 16. But unfortunately, while studying in Allahabad, he was infected by tuberculosis, and it was a very fatal disease at that time. Death was inevitable. So he wrote his poems. Most of his poems are melancholy and pessimistic in nature. And ultimately, on 14th September 1947, he died. He has good collection of poems, and he's treated one of the great poets of Hindi literature. He was born in Kedar Valley, and he had great fascination for the nature, for the beauty of Kedar Valley. And the valley appears almost in every motive, in every metaphor, in every image of his poetry. अपने उद्गम को लौट रही अब बहना छोड़ नदी मेरी, छोटे से अणु में डूब रही अब जीवन की पृथ्वी मेरी, was the poem written on the approaching death of the poet. He creates a metaphor unparalleled in the history of world literature, that the river of his life is flowing back to its source, and the entire world of his physical and mental consciousness is shrinking to a small atom. And he has been sighing, and he says, I'm dying in this beautiful valley of Kedarnath.
अपने उद्गम को लौट रही, अपने उद्गम को लौट रही, अब बहना छोड़ नदी मेरी, अब बहना छोड़ नदी मेरी, अब जीवन की पृथ्वी मेरी अपने उद्गम को लौट आँखों में सुख से पिघल पिघल आ, आ, आँखों में सुख से पिघल पिघल होठों में स्मृति भरता भरता मेरा जीवन धीरे धीरे इस सुंदर घाटी में मरता अपने उद्गम को लौट अब बहना छोड़ नदी मेरी अपने उद्गम को लौट ये पद विश्राम मांगते अब इस हरी भरी धरती में ये पद विश्राम मांगते अब इस हरी भरी धरती में ये पद न थके जो कभी कभी वे अब न सकेंगे पग भर जा अपने उद्गम को लौट अब जीवन की पृथ्वी मेरी अपने उद्गम को लौट अब
Next, we have Suniti Bhushan Datta, a wildlife biologist, photographer, and endurance cyclist.
Hello, my name is Suniti Bhushan Datta, and I am a naturalist and a cyclist. This is my story about rediscovering the natural history around the Doon Valley, my home, by bicycle. When the lockdown started, the atmosphere cleared, blue skies reigned, and stars, unseen over my home for decades, returned. Having explored forests around the country, being confined to the few square yards of my home garden was stifling at first, but my instincts as a naturalist led me to explore this tiny suburban space instead, and I discovered so much right under my nose. There were beady-eyed spiders and shiny beetles, iridescent flies, metallic wasps, and colorful butterflies, many of which I had never encountered before. Eventually, we were allowed out for morning walks and cycle rides. The streets were empty, almost devoid of motorized traffic. I was once again able to visit my favorite routes through the forests and along mountain streams around the valley. But never again would I ever take these rides for granted. Now, along with the exercise, I also take the opportunity to explore, look around and revel in the beauty of the valley. For a change, I now stop to smell the flowers, listen to the bird songs, and look around. Just outside the crowds and noise of the city is a treasure trove of natural history just waiting to be explored. Every ride is a new experience. Every ride is a story.
The The Great Himalayan Traverse, a 100-day outdoor and environment-based semester in the Himalaya, is not for the faint-hearted. The semester aims to help students immerse themselves in the culture and natural history of the Himalayan regions of Ladakh, Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, while learning practical skills such as leadership, teamwork and decision-making. By engaging in activities such as mountaineering, wilderness first aid and targeted social service, students will gain hands-on experience and insight into topics such as environmental degradation, human-wildlife conflict, and conservation within the regions of the Western Himalaya. On the semester, students will spend 70% of time trekking, mountaineering, and service learning, while the remainder of the time will be spent engaging with local communities and traveling between locations.
Next, we have Ramachandra Guha, one of India's foremost historians and biographers, who will be introducing us to Himalayan traveler and historian Shekhar Pathak.
Hi, I am Ramachandra Guha, and I'm delighted to be participating in the Mussoorie Mountain Festival, talking about the new book in English by the great Uttarakhandi historian Shekhar Pathak, who's written many books in Hindi. And the book in English is a translation of this book, Hari Bhari Umeed, which is a magisterial definitive history of the Chipko movement by the state's foremost historian and a participant in the Chipko movement himself. Now, let me start with a Mussoorie memory. After our state was formed in 2000, I was visiting Uttarakhand. I was born and raised in Dehradun, but I now live in Bangalore. And after the state was formed, I went to the Mussoorie Academy, the IAS Academy, to give a talk. Shortly after this state was formed, and these are pre-cell phone days. So as soon as I reached, I put my bags in the guest house, walked to the mall, found an STD booth, which probably doesn't exist anymore, and from there called Shekhar Pathak on his hilltop in Nainital overlooking the lake. And I said, he picked up the phone, I said, Shekhar, मैं राम बोल रहा हूँ, मैं अपने प्रदेश से बोल रहा हूँ. You know, that was my, the first time I reached Uttarakhand after it was formed, I called my closest friend who was the other side of the state. Now, Shekhar Pathak was born in Ganguli Hat in Kumaon. He then studied in Almora, now teaches in Nainital. I first met him in the early 80s when I was doing research on what was to become my book, The Unquiet Woods, which started as a history of the Chipko movement, but then became a kind of a study of forest protests in general from the 19th century. And we would exchange notes on archival findings, the kind of stuff historians get their hands dirty in. And he quickly became more or less my brother. He was then starting his magazine Pahad. I remember attending the Vimotion, or the first release ceremony in Pithoragarh, where the celebrated environmentalist and social activist Chandi Prasad Bhatt released the first volume. Pahad has now gone through 20 iterations. In my book, The Unquiet Woods, published in 1989, I said in a footnote that Shekhar Pathak is writing the definitive history of the Chipko movement. Now, I put Nazir on my friend because it's taken him 30 years to write that history, but he's done all kinds of stuff in that time. He has brought out these 20 volumes of Pahad. He has published a fabulous biography of the great explorer Nain Singh Rawat. He has over 4 times. He's undergone a near-death experience himself. He's trekked all over the place. And in between all these different preoccupations, guiding students, teaching students, mentoring activists, he has been gathering material on the Chipko movement. And what is special about this book is that, which will soon come in English, published by Permanent Black, it should be out in November, is that this book is based on extraordinary amounts of research. You know, Shekhar is someone who is the acknowledged encyclopedia of Uttarakhand. He knows every valley, every stone, every river, more or less every butterfly, and every Brahma Kamal in the hills. And he has talked to the participants in every village, and particularly focused on women, students, journalists. And the book was written in Hindi, as I've said. It was translated by Manisha Chaudhary, a respected translator in Delhi. And I have edited and shaped it as partly a historian of the hills myself, and as someone who has known Shekhar for 30 years, probably knows at least the intellectual part of his mind better than most people, I sort of shaped it for an English audience. There's much more detail in the Hindi audience, in the Hindi edition, for those who want the nitty-gritty of more details on Uttarakhand. But it is a beautifully written, richly researched evocation of the most famous and the most misunderstood environmental movement in the world. Now, Shekhar is an extraordinary person, and I have a long introduction in the book, in the English version of the book, about him, his life, his journey, his career. And, he's someone who's been to every mountain. He and I are friends because we're very different. I was English speaking, he's Hindi speaking. I'm a kind of archive rat. I burrow in libraries and archives. He travels all over the world, and I have kind of letters from him from every hilltop in the Himalaya, from Ladakh, from Nepal, from Arunachal, from Nagaland. And only once it fell to me to visit a mountain he had not been to. I was going to a academic seminar in Ecuador, a kind of junket in Ecuador, and I wrote to Shekhar saying I'll be out of touch for a few weeks. This is sort of pre-email days. This is the mid-90s, and he sent me back a postcard. He said, "Andes Parvat ko Himalaya ka pranam." And that's the one time I visited another mountaintop, carrying the best wishes to the Andes of this great son of Uttarakhand and the Himalaya, Shekhar Pathak. So the book will be out in English in November, published by Permanent Black in Ranikhet by a Pahadi publisher appropriately. And it's wonderful to be speaking about it in the Mussoorie Mountain Festival.
Our next speaker is Himalayan traveler and historian Shekhar Pathak, who will speak on his latest book, Hari Bari Umaid.
Namaste to all the participants of Mussoorie Mountain Festival. Thank you so much to the organizers to mention my 2 books in the festival. I have already participated in this festival many times, always enjoyed and always learned so much from the participants. I also thank to my friends related with the publication of my 2 books. First, I would like to thank Advani Prakashan for publishing Hari Bari Umaid, the Hindi version of the book, the original version. And I would also like to thank dear Manisha Chaudhary for translating the book from Hindi original to English. My dear Ramachandra Guha for editing and introducing the book. And Rukun Advani for publishing the book from Permanent Black. Both the books are related with the centrality of forests in the mountain life, also on the life in planet, how human beings encroached into the wilderness, the forests, and how especially during colonial period and post-colonial times, how our own society, our own rulers encroached into this wilderness, into these forests of the Himalaya and elsewhere. Everybody knows that forests are very central to our lives. In the mountains, without forests, we can't think about agriculture, we can't think about animal husbandry, cottage industries, we can't think about our hydrological systems, our water springs, our rivers. I many times call forests as the green glaciers in the Himalaya. And how our society protested against the colonial encroachment into the forest in the name of Jungle Satyagraha. And after 50 years, how under our old rulers, our society protested against the forest rights, against for the conservation of the forest in the form of Chipko movement. What kind of issues were related with Chipko movement or earlier with Jungle Satyagraha? What kind of leadership Chipko movement during Chipko movement evolved, how people participated, young people, village women, intellectuals, journalists, scientists and many others, how they contributed in their own ways. and what kind of leadership we had during Chipko movement, and what kind of offspring still we can see in the mountains, doing so many types of creative works among people, among community. As a historian, I have tried to use multidimensional source material in both the books, from the folklore to folk historical material to vernacular journalism, vernacular press, to records, to forest records, settlement reports, and many other kind of archival material. So many books and articles published in last 30-40 years or last 200 years after the coming of British rule here. All these kind of source material is used, and also I have interviewed the leaders, the participants, the women, the young men, and also people who participated in Jungle Satyagraha 20s. So this kind of variety of source material is also there. What else I can say about these books? Only readers and experts can say something. I have done my work, that is all. I again thank Mussoorie Mountain Festival. Thank you so much.
Up next, we have Ranikhet-based publisher Rukun Advani, who will speak on what it means to run a publishing firm from a remote place in the Himalaya.
If you are a reader of books on South Asian history, politics and sociology, it is likely that you have heard of a small publisher called Permanent Black. Permanent Black began life on 1 April 2000 in Ranikhet. 1st April was the right day on which to begin our publishing life, because at that time, 20 years back, the decision seemed foolhardy. In retrospect, it has turned out otherwise. But before I say more about Permanent Black, I should outline the broader pan-Indian context in which a press such as ours exists and operates. In India, the market for books can be divided into 4 broad segments. First, textbooks for schools and colleges. Second, science, medicine, technology books. Third, trade and general readers books such as fiction and non-fiction, and illustrated books. The biggest international brand in this segment is Penguin Random House, but there are also others such as Hachette and HarperCollins. Finally, there is the smallest segment for books, which is the one in which our own small Pahadi press operates. And this is the market for scholarly and research books for university professors and libraries. This segment is very small in terms of turnover and investment requirements, but from our point of view, it has one huge advantage over the other segments. It allows the existence and survival of small publishers in remote locations such as Ranikhet, where there is now a decent broadband connection. This is the reason that Anuradha Roy and I have been able to run our small outfit Permanent Black from a cottage in Ranikhet for the past 20 years. Over these 20 years, we have published about 375 new books, meaning on average 18 new books per year. This is a small output relative to the larger presses, but since we are only 2 people with no employees, and since our office is only 2 laptops inside a low-rent cottage, meaning our overheads are very low, we have survived quite comfortably. Apart from our location in Ranikhet, our other hill connection has been to publish scholarly writing about the mountains. One of our earliest books was by the Harvard scholar Richard Wolff, who wrote an anthropological account of tribal music in the Nilgiri Hills. We have also published a great history work of the Himachal region called Himalayan Histories by Chetan Singh, a friend who teaches in Shimla. One of Bill Aitken's loveliest books called Footloose in the Himalaya has been a regular seller in our list for the past 15 years. Last year we published a fine sociological and historical account by a scholar based in Garhwal, Lokesh Ori. His book called Till Kingdom Come is about a Hindu cult centered on the Hanol temple, which houses a deity called Mahashu Devta. Ori shows that the rituals around this deity have developed a political color with the arrival of modern religious politics. For anyone interested in the history of Hinduism in the mountains, this book is a spectacular eye-opener. Lokesh Ori approached Permanent Black to publish his book on the recommendation of Shekhar Pathak. No one with a serious interest in mountain history in North India can be unaware of Shekhar Pathak, who is among the most respected historians of mountain life in Uttarakhand. We met Shekhar many years ago for two reasons. First, because Ram Guha, whose first book, The Unquiet Woods, I had published in 1985 when working for the OUP, and which he let us publish a new edition of in 2015, had told us it made no sense for us to be running a mountain press in Uttarakhand if we failed to publish the finest historian of the region, namely Shekhar. Ram's own Unquiet Woods is a pioneering history of colonial exploitation and peasant protest against the takeover of forests. It was the first to look at colonial rule from the perspective of natural rather than mineral and labor resource extraction. But Ram said he was sure that once Shekhar published his book on the history and prehistory of Chipko, it would supersede his own classic. Being himself an honorary Garhwali, Ram urged us for sentimental reasons to publish Shekhar, and he urged Shekhar to publish with Permanent Black, and this has now happened. Shekhar Pathak's The Chipko Movement, A People's History is in press and will appear within a few weeks. It will not sideline The Unquiet Woods by Ram Guha because that book's focus is largely on the 19th century. Shekhar's book is, however, superior in one sense. It is one of the most solidly and empirically grounded and field-oriented histories that anyone will ever write on Uttarakhand. His knowledge of geography and society and culture and religious traditions is based on his intimate knowledge of Kumaoni, Garhwali related dialects, as well as on extensive travel and personal knowledge of village people, crafts, crops, flora and fauna of our mountain region.
Cha